could pass for a punishing weather phenomenon. Folks, it's raining taxes and levies. From housing to health and down to your payslip, it's collection time. In what is perhaps the most aggressive taxation drive in the country's recent history, pay as you earn, up from a maximum of 30 to 35%. Housing levy, 3% from your payslip and 3% from your employer. NHIF, 2.7% from your payslip as at now. And who knows what next? It is a taxation minefield if initial reactions by experts is anything to go by. But beyond experts, what should you, the taxpayer, expect? And the week of peace it has become, courtesy of a last-minute deal between the ruling Kenya Kwanza and the opposition Azimio la Umoja coalition. So, MP Adan Kenyan is out of the bipartisan talks team, and in return, maandamano protests are off the table. For now. And so, what is next? Sam Sense dissects the sense of collecting taxes without reciprocal delivery of services. Jamila's memo takes note of a peaceful military transition. No servers involved. Kaikai's kicker kicks 3 cheers for the Kenyan media on World Press Freedom Day. And my take walks in and out of a chaotic KICC meeting room and, hey, MCAs were in town. The gang is here.
Niliwaambia haiwezekani kwamba mimi rais nalipa shilingi 1,700 kila mwezi, na mama mboga na mtu ya bodaboda analipa shilingi 500 ili akuwe na kadi ya NHIF. Mimi mshahara yangu ni 1,000,000. Yule bodaboda mapato yake ni 5,000. Kuna ungwana pale kweli?
That was the President of the Republic of Kenya on Labor Day just a few days ago. And in there, of course, talking about NHIF, talking about the housing levy, which is something he'd mentioned before. And of course, all of that coming on the back of the finance bill for the coming financial year being tabled in Parliament today. So we're getting a clearer picture of what the taxations will look like for the next 12 months in the country. I beg your pardon, the next 12 months. And that is where, ladies and gentlemen, we begin our conversation. So guys, where do we begin? I think, Sam, we begin with you. So, you know, we'll get to the housing fund in a bit, which was sort of mentioned at a church service, I think, about 2 weeks ago. But let's start by talking about the NHIF, which is what the president is talking about, and the proposals therein.
Right, 12 months, not 12
12 months, 12 months.
That got me.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
That would be such a long time.
Wouldn't it?
A whole presidential term and more.
And more. Yeah.
But anyway, so looking at NHIF, and of course, this is a conversation that began whereas, remember the time of campaigns, the manifesto, what the Kenya Kwanza regime called the plan. And they really acknowledged that there was a challenge in terms of the amount of money that members were contributing, saying that this is not enough. There's a place that they would want to go, and especially when it comes to universal health coverage. So the component of financing was a big problem, yes, but obviously they're also acknowledging the other challenges when it comes to human resource, but also the facilities themselves. And I would just want to take a look at, for instance, what is being proposed to happen, because I think this is one of the few times that the president has spoken about the 2.75%, the rate of contribution that is based on the salary that a person is getting. And of course, we know that they're also saying that for those that are self-employed, it will be 2.75% of the income as assessed, because they have also to declare, those people that are self-employed have to declare how much money they are making. But there is something else, which is to do with the minimum contribution going lower to some 300 shillings. And this is intended to make sure that the persons at the bottom of the pyramid are able to be taken care of by the National Health Insurance Fund. But there is also the persons that are unemployed. They are required to pay a monthly fee, or the monthly contribution of at least 1,000 shillings. Obviously, this is up from the current, which is about 500 shillings. And beyond that, what we know, if we can take a look at what that would mean, especially to persons that have been receiving their monthly income. If your salary is about 12,000 shillings, then currently you're paying 500 shillings as the minimum amount, but that could change to about 330 shillings, which is 2.75%. That goes all the way to a person earning 1 million shillings like the president, that is the basic pay, currently paying 1,700 shillings. 2.75% would translate to 27,500 shillings. For persons earning 100,000, then that comes to 2,750 shillings. And obviously, we'll be looking later at the impact of this on the payslip, Yvonne, knowing that too well that, yes, this is not just the only statutory deduction that is made to your income if you're salaried. There are others that have to be factored in. But it gives the country an opportunity to decide based on the much that you've been contributing. Remember, there's a time that the contribution, I think, was about 320 shillings, either 320 shillings or 360 shillings. But then there was review of the law and the regulations, and that is why currently the maximum contribution is 1,700 shillings. So it's a moment for the country to decide. Yes, there's a desire to go the universal health coverage route, but there's also the desire to access services and quality services at that. Because also there are people that are employed, you contribute to NHIF, but you also have private medical service, medical insurance rather, which also you are contributing, or your employer is contributing to. So if the rate, the NHIF deduction is to go higher than what it is now, then what value are the Kenyans getting from the same service? And
even on the same thing, for those who've been employed for years, you've been contributing to NHIF every month. And personally, I can't speak for everyone on this table, the most that I've ever gotten out of my NHIF card when I go to hospital, get admitted, is I think 1,700 shillings per night for the bed. For, let's say you're admitted for 7 days, it will be per night for 7 days, and that's it. You have other costs, which include the medical costs, if you went into surgery, if you had a test done, if you had an x-ray done, if you had medication that you were given. So you really don't feel what the NHIF card does for you, despite contributing for 20 odd years that you've been working. And of course, there are these proposed changes. And Gituku, you said something here that there are those who are paying the NHIF contribution, or also maybe because of the company they work for, if it's in the formal sector, you're deducted some amount of money, which goes into now the private medical cover. And it's what you use for yourself and your children. And to a large extent, it's what works for a majority of those who are in the formal sector. Yes, of course, maybe you may exhaust what you have at some point because it's a yearly thing, but it takes you some distance in terms of now being able to pay for medical cover for yourself and your children. Homa hapa, infection here, you need an antibiotic here, you need a blood test here, you need and all that. That works. But then now, for those who earn certain amounts of money, of course, because the plan here is like those who earn a lot more will be deducted more than those who are earning less. But will this now translate to benefits, that when you go with your NHIF card to the hospital, you're actually going to get some sort of treatment with it. If you get admitted, some of the amount of money that you will be deducted from an NHIF card. Because even if I look at some of the statistics here, I was looking at it, because of course these changes are meant to give NHIF some lifeline. Because in the financial year that ended June 2022, NHIF collected premiums worth about 78 billion shillings. You compare it with their target of 90 billion. And then now you have what you call dormant members, those who don't contribute anything. Last year, they were at 8.8 million, up from 5.3 million the previous year. Of course, they added some members, about 1.3 million of them in the informal sector. And then the formal sector had about 100,000 of those. So you see now, even those in the informal sector, you cannot force them to pay NHIF. It's actually voluntary, because in the formal sector, inakatwa haswa kwa payslip yako. So you have all these things about NHIF and the plans, isaidia watu wapate matibabu, but the question is, will it work? Will it change? Will we see now NHIF actually being able to be used and actually provide services for people who are deducted money and pay at the end of every month?
Yeah, and you talk about, the benefits of that. I think in the last 6 years or so, I've been hospitalized 7 times, and only once has NHIF paid for the bed charges. And I'm sure there's many others who can give their account of whether, what you are contributing is then commensurate with what you receive. And now that we're talking about, dormant members and those in formal employment and those paying voluntarily, only 20% of registered voluntary members were active in the year 2022, just to add on to, what you were saying. And so this means if it wasn't mandatory, would Kenyans really continue to pay for it? What is the confidence that they have in the NHIF to provide the services that they're actually paying for? But, there is a big need for health insurance in the country, because even as we talk about those who are in formal employment and who are receiving private insurance, by the way, let's be honest, that is a privilege, because that is something that is provided courtesy of your employer. Of course, the salaried workers are deducted an amount of money. But listen, in the country, only 2% are covered by private insurers. So that means there is huge potential. There's a big number of Kenyans who are not insured for their health in any shape or form, right? And therefore, these are the people we should be targeting. But they should be targeted by a fund that gives back. And let me just, talk about the scandals that have not helped with the confidence that we're talking about. For instance, those 20% who remain dormant. In 2019, February, investigators said NHIF could have lost more than 10 billion shillings in false claims. In 2018, November, 1 billion shillings was reported stolen in fictitious transactions, irregular award of tenders, manipulation of the systems. In May of 2022, NHIF could not account for how 400 million shillings that was meant to cover medical expenses of police officers was spent. It was difficult to verify the claims, as there are no records of expenditure or beneficiaries, and this was reported by the Auditor General. And some of the issues that she had raised at that time were payment to ghost clinics and procedural selection of clinics, creation of an unapproved unit at NHIF. You'll all remember the scandal recently of the 1.1 billion shillings. The charges were dropped against the former CEO. Well and good, there was not enough evidence. That's what the DPP said, and the court agreed. Charges were dropped. But you see, there's still the matter of 1.1 billion shillings that was misappropriated. So what happens to that? There's also the other issues of NHIF and whether they are reimbursing facilities. For instance, governors have complained that they reimburse private hospitals at a faster rate than public facilities, thereby crippling their operations. So look at all of these scandals that beset the NHIF. Why would anyone have confidence in this insurer? Furthermore, why then an increase in the cost? How does this give Kenyans the assurance that you're deducting more from me and it will be helpful considering everything we've seen over the years? Linus.
Very, very good question, Yvonne. And when new taxes are introduced, that introduction ought to be also be accompanied by an assessment of the levels of confidence, especially in the public. How receptive are they going to be in paying these taxes? Do they see the point in paying those taxes? Do they understand where their money is going to? Because I think we're in a very interesting space where the country is talking of being in a very tough economic situation with the cost of living shooting right through the roof. But this is an oxymoron that is where we are. We don't even have enough unga for people, but we are talking of adjusting taxes in a way that will impact so hugely on the very small workforce, small employed workforce in this country. Because let's face it, there's only that limited number of people that are going to bear this burden. you can't, when we talk of the level of employment or unemployment in this country, we are in a crisis. We are in a serious crisis. A lot of youth can't get jobs. People who are very well qualified, highest academic standards, are doing what we call tarmacking. They are jobless. And so these measures will hit existing payslips. And I was trying to look at where this is coming from. And where it's basically coming from is, first of all, when you come up with very ambitious plans to grow the economy, especially throw money around, you need to raise that money somehow. And I think this is why the government is having to resort to very interesting proposals. And by the way, if you look at the tax bill, it also talks of fake beards, fake eyelashes. They'll be targeted to
wigs. Wow, go on, just go down the list.
Wigs.
Just keep going.
And okay,
guilty on all
right.
Except the fake beard.
It's not unusual. It's not a uniquely Kenyan thing. and when you look at the ancient methods of taxation, actually, when I saw fake beards, I remembered the story of Peter the Great, the Russian Tsar, who in 1705 was taxing men. If you have a beard, if you keep a beard, then you have to pay a tax.
Okay.
And then further south, in the era of the pharaohs in Egypt, the pharaoh used to tax what they called fat tax. Fat, like if you are...
Is that where that came from? Yes.
Yeah, fat tax.
Yeah.
And again, there are two things that were happening there. If you grow beyond a certain size, you're taxed. And also, you are not allowed to reuse cooking oil. So if you reuse it, then you have to pay. So these weird taxation measures, we may see a lot of that coming, because if you have plans, like the Kenya Kwanza administration is calling it, you have to fund the plan. But a thought to Kenyans out there, because the economy has not grown. So, I mean, this should work the way it would normally work even in a domestic situation. You can only tax growth. You know, there's productivity, and so you can. Now, we can't even produce enough maize, which is the easiest thing that we can go self-reliant on. But we are talking of a series of taxes. And when you look at the remarks from Monday to Thursday, it's only 4 days. Wow, you don't want to see what the end of the week may look like.
Indeed. And, you talk about, how difficult it is, the workforce and how people don't have jobs. Remember, many of the jobs that were lost during the COVID period have not been regained. People have remained redundant. I think we were talking about this earlier. I know in Nairobi, we've seen the acrobats who, perform their act at the traffic lights, and then ask for handouts from the drivers. From the motorists. COVID is long gone. They were out of work. No one was going to hotels, but many of them still are at the traffic light stop. Still performing acts and still seeking money from motorists. So that just tells you there's many jobs that were lost. I
hope you're not giving a taxation hint.
Oh my gosh, no. Yeah, please, let's,
At the traffic lights.
It could very well be, but that just gives you a sense of the work environment. We'll talk about, the other housing levy in a minute, but, just to buttress what we're talking about, Jacqueline Mugo, who's the CEO or the Executive Director of the Federation of Kenya Employers, talked about this and how difficult this environment is for employers on Labor Day. Let's listen to her.
Wages in this country are very well regulated by the laws that we have, the wage guidelines and the relevant laws, which state that they should be reviewed not more frequently than once every 2 years. And we are aware that last year there was a 12% increase on the minimum wage.
And you see, all of these new taxes are coming at a time when minimum wage there was no increase in minimum wage announced this year. And you know, even the minimum wage in itself is, how often is it implemented? That's a story for another day. But when we're talking about jobs, the economic survey report that just came out recently showed a decline in jobs in the year 2022, that the private sector created 94.5 thousand jobs, down from 125,000 jobs the previous year in 2021. This is the situation that we're dealing with, Sam. It's quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a serious situation, knowing also that the cost of doing business is going higher and higher. And that's why you find even the employers, they'll be complaining. Every other time that you find them approaching the Labor Day, they'll be feeling like, we don't want the minimum wage to be raised, at least not for now. The cost of energy is too high. And this is the reality, because, I mean, starting the 1st of April this year, you saw what happened to the electricity bills, that previously what you're able to access with how much you are paying for tokens is not the same right now, unless you use up to 30 tokens, 30 units every other month, because that cadre is what they're calling the lifeline cadre, so that you find that there's a slight decline on the cost of electricity. But everyone else that is above that, then you're finding that the amount of money that you've been spending on electricity monthly, you now have to spend more. And at the same time now, with the regulations that are being proposed, if they're implemented, then you'll find that you're having to contribute something extra. And then early in the year, you will recall that NSSF contributions, they went up from 200 shillings to 1,080 shillings maximum. And this is to be matched by the employer as well. So then, of course, the other taxes that we'll be mentioning shortly from now. So you look at that and it hits you that it's not just painful for the employee, it's also painful for the employers. These are business persons. There are so many other taxes that are being suggested in the finance bill of 2013. So that environment then gets to a situation that you're wondering, how then do we grow the economy? How then do we grow the revenues of people? Because if you lose the value of what amount that you've been earning, then you're lost, because your buying power is also reduced. And I don't know that this is the best time to now talk about what is just about to happen to our taxes, because the finance bill is out, as Yvonne was talking about. I want us to just take a look at two slides that will give us an indication of what's happening, because at the moment, the taxation is in a sense that for every person earning more than 24,000 shillings, you're taxed. If you're earning 24,000 and below, then you pay zero tax. But there's a suggestion now to make sure that persons earning more than 500,000 shillings, then they'll be charged 35% on top of that. For the moment, is the graduated scale of 10%, 25%, and 30%. 30% being the highest, but now the introduction is that for any person that is earning more than 500,000, you get to that. Let's take a look at a model payslip, how it would look. If, for instance, you earn 600,000 shillings. Okay, let's start with that. 100,000 shillings.
Okay.
That's the work of Robert. If you earn 100,000 shillings, then you find that the taxation that will be coming from you.
I think we go back to the previous slide, Robert. The one on 100,000 shillings.
Yes.
Yeah, so that we can move with the viewer, because you find that the numbers are different.
Yeah, it's coming up, I think. Yeah, the previous slide, There
you are. So NSSF contribution is 1,080 shillings. For pay as you earn, it's 21,804 shillings. NHIF currently is 1,700. It's being proposed to go up to 2,750. There's a housing levy which is being introduced at 3%, so 3% to be paid by the employee and to be also matched by the employer at the same rate. So you'll find that at that point, the deductions will rise from 24,585 to 28,635 shillings. So the net pay will decline from 75,000 to 71,365 just by affecting the NHIF contribution and the factor of housing levy being charged. Let's take a look at some other figures. For instance, what will be affected for those persons that are earning, say, 600,000 shillings. Of course, they are in the minority in the country. Not many are lucky to be at that position. But it is being suggested that anything above 500,000 shillings will be charged 35% of taxation. And I just wanted us to take a look at that to see what that impact will be. So, for instance, the current payee will be 171,804 shillings. But now, with the proposed changes, then that will mean that it goes up to 176,804. If you earn 800,000 shillings, currently you're paying tax of 231,804 shillings. It is likely to go up to 246,000 should the finance bill be implemented. For that people that earn 1 million shillings, currently the pay is 291,000. That may go up to 316,000 shillings. So what would be the impact on the payslip? Obviously, is something that would be interesting to look at, Yvonne.
Yvonne, I think also, as Gituku has explained all those, the new taxes and the exact amounts, there are other deductions that are in the payslip. For instance, the 100,000 shillings he was talking about goes to about 71,000, is it? The new taxes would be how much you'll be taking home.
Yes.
You probably may have loans that you're paying, deduct that. Maybe you contribute to a SACCO, deduct that. Maybe you're contributing to an education fund for your children, deduct that. So, which means inapungua. But then we look at it from the point of view of the employer. We just listened to Madam Jacqueline Mugo talking about how it wasn't possible to announce an increase in the minimum wage. The employer is supposed to match, for instance, let's look at the NSSF, the 6%, that's an additional cost. 1080 yako, 1080 ya mwajiri wako. Add the 3% housing fund. Employer pia alipe yake. Of course, the amount that the employer and the employee contribute cannot exceed 5,000 shillings per month. Then now, look at those employees. We talked about those earning 500,000, above 500,000, 35%. But now you charge them more, but you're not increasing their salaries. That minority that we're talking about, there is that too. And then employers will ask themselves, how am I going to employ more people if this is how things are going to be? And then we remember how a lot of businesses were affected during COVID. Most have not bounced back or are in the process of bouncing back. And then now cost of credit has gone up, which means now our loans are getting more expensive. So everything is just negative, negative, negative. Nothing seems to be on the up and up in terms of now the employer and the employee and the new taxes that are being introduced. So
yeah, and you know, when you take a look at the housing levy, it's interesting, it's being reintroduced at this point, and now it's double what was done before. So we've been here with the housing levy before, during the previous Jubilee administration, and at that point, the proposal was, and in fact it was passed into law, but then, you know, the implementation of it suspended by the High Court. It was 1.5% of the salary. Now the proposal is 3%. And at the time when this matter was taken to court by COFEC and others, you know, they said, and I quote, "It would be unreasonable to compel citizens who will not secure a house to contribute towards house ownership by another person without corresponding benefits." They also talked about the fact that, this was what they claimed, there were no consultations on the same. And so now we want to ask, what have been the lessons learned from, you know, what happened before and the suspension of that housing fund levy? And you know, to date, that was never implemented. And now here we are, not just with 1.5, but twice that. I would wonder what sort of consultations were done before arriving at the 3% figure. There's, you know, people who say, well, what happens to those who are on a mortgage? There's others who say, well, have we decided, you know, collectively that owning a house is every Kenyan's priority? I know there are a couple of exit plans that have been, you know, thought about in the finance bill that has been tabled. Perhaps those who are closer to retirement and are being, you know, deducted, that money can then be put into their pension scheme or a retirement scheme. But you see, these are issues that they're going to have to deal with again. And I think, like we've talked about, NHIF, NSSF, pay, electricity tariffs have gone up, the CBK rate has gone up. If you have a loan, you know you've received a text message in the last month or so informing you of an increase in your repayment. Do you guys remember that song by Eric Wainaina, Nchi ya Kitu Kidogo? At the end, it featured Ridiculous. And Nyambane, in that last piece, maybe we'll get that clip one day, and he talks about the taxation. This was way back when. And it says, you know, we're paying everything. Pay as you earn as you pay, marriage tax and all of that. It was obviously comical, but you know, here we are again. I don't know for anybody else, but it just rings true now, once again. Linus, as we close.
Indeed, and it will be about the timing of this conversation. I think the timing is the greatest issue here. Is this the right time to throw this at Kenyans? And if indeed it is, have we addressed the greater concerns that relate to previous tax collection cultures? The previous administration of former President Uhuru Kenyatta admitted that the country was losing nearly a third of its national annual budget to corruption. And then the American embassy put the figure at about 800 billion. Now, without a trace of irony, we've proceeded not to address those things about the wastage, and the chief economic advisor of the government sat here and said, wastage is the greatest problem. And
now they want us to give more?
And they want us to give more, and they are not going to account for the loopholes in the wastage. One would have expected that there'll be a period of, first of all, organizing things. You know, the new administration is only about eight months old now. But there is a lot of housekeeping that also needed to have happened before you go into this direction. I also think, and this is very traditional wisdom, that you can't do so many things at the same time. One will slip through your fingers. There's a Maasai saying about that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't use my Maasai right now. But yes, you can't do so many things at the same time. You can't have so many things in the fireplace at the same time, because one or two will actually let you down. I have a sense that we are biting a lot. In 3 days alone, we've moved from housing to NHIF, and now the finance bill comes targeting fake eyelashes and things like that. All in about 3 days, I think we are biting quite a lot. But also, the question of wastage needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And if you remember, it's common street talk. Kenyans will tell you, Kenya is a very resilient country. Tuko na pesa sana. This country doesn't collapse despite the number of scandals that it has. Whether you're talking of KEMSA, Afia House, Aror Kimarer, you know, money just disappears. But somehow, the worst thing that can happen is the Rift Valley cracking during the rains. The country doesn't come down, really. Yeah. So we are a resilient economy. It tells you there is something that works a lot about the country. If only wastage was controlled. And you know, the other thing we should be very concerned about is corruption graft is actually disappearing from the public vocabulary. Yeah. You don't hear it anymore. Yeah. Do we suddenly don't have corruption? I saw at least one story today, ESCC coming to say a few things. We hope the Directorate of Prosecutions doesn't speak tomorrow and say something else with regard to the same. You know, and corruption has been our greatest problem. We haven't addressed it, and we want to send in more cash in that direction. And when we speak of that, look at the history of NSSF in this country. Yeah. NSSF has been like the mother of it's the mothership of corruption. And that is something that we need to, actually, these are some of the conversations that the new administration needs to confront. If you close your eyes on some of these things, by the way, we can collect all this, because there's something also that is happening with the population in Kenya. Kenyans don't ask a lot of questions. Yeah. And I remember it was very funny when there was water shortage. How do Kenyans react to water shortage? And even fuel. What did we do? We bought jerrycans. Yeah. Yes. You don't demand that this is fixed. You unajipanga So even when all this is listed, and there's quite a long list coming from the finance bill, tutajipanga. That's the Kenyan culture.
Yes, yes. Sam, quickly.
And the interesting bit that we should not forget, because if you keep coming to the taxpayer or the salaried or the person that has an income, when do you stop coming? Because just yesterday, the president was speaking about the 3 categories of how higher education will be financed. And there's one category that is for the vulnerable. These are people that the government will sponsor. There are those that are less vulnerable, so they'll be sponsored to a great extent by the government, but also they get loans, which they'll service once they're done with school. But also their parents will be contributing about 7% of that. Then there are those that are categorized to be able. And for the families that are able, these are families that have a salary, I would imagine. These are persons that are having the taxation that is being taken from them going up. These are people that the NHIF contribution is going up. These are people that the housing fund is supposed to be going up. Yet these are families, because of their means, their vision about life. These are people probably are already setting up their homes or the homes of their families. These are people that may have already taken a mortgage, but you go ahead and demand a housing levy from them, money that may not end up assisting them. I mean, there's something there that we need to have a conversation about, because Kenyans pay taxes so that services can be delivered. So what are those services? They're in education. But when you tell people that you will pay for it, despite the fact that you are paying the taxes, I think there's a bit of mismatch there.
And Yvonne, as we take a break, I was looking at some of the countries that charge really, really high taxes. Some of them charge as high as 56%.
On pay.
On pay. That's Finland. Japan, I think, charge about 55.9%. Denmark charge about... I don't see the number. I think it's another 50%. So we go up to countries which charge up to about 45, 47%. You have 40%. Countries like Portugal, Ireland. But then now you look at the quality of life in those countries. The taxes are tied to the quality of life that a country can offer. Because services work. You have education. Probably you pay taxes and the children go to school for free. You have you have transport. You don't have to worry about transport costs. You probably have a roof over your head. You're probably able to afford basic commodities, because the taxes that you give at the end of the month from your pay, from your jobs, actually do work for you. And I think for a lot of people, if they have that I'm getting taxed 50% of my salary, but at least services work. I don't have to worry about my children going to school. I don't have to worry about having a roof over my head. I don't have to worry about being able to afford the basic commodities. They would be able to do it. But you look at an example of a country where you are taxed, but then now you seem to have to worry about everything all the time.
Yeah, think about it. Water.
There's a cartoon behind you, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, my. Let me add some more. It'll all make sense in a year, I promise. Yeah,
as someone who goes to the gym, I know this is terrible. At this point, you are finished. You know, when you're talking about double taxation, you know, just some of the things that don't...
too.
Oh, and their per diems too.
Going to be taxed.
I just wanted to say that if you sink a borehole, do you know that you're also supposed to pay? There's a levy you have to pay to the county government.
Now, see that. That is why... before we take a break and come back and talk about the next thing, that clip I was talking about at the end, I found it. He says, Batu Nyaldire. If you know what that means in Bantu, we are finished completely. Robert, this is what being in Kenya today feels like. A reminder back to that song.